This evening, we're going to be speaking about municipal service center relocation associated with the Duke Life Point Hospital construction relocation project. That being said, we're going to try to focus exclusively on just the service center relocation part. So we know you probably have a lot of questions about relocating the hospital. You might have some questions about federal or state roadway, how we're going to reconstruct some of the local transportation infrastructure, things like that. And we'll be glad to take those questions, but we're not really prepared to have that dialogue this evening. Tonight, we're really here to provide kind of an update and a description of what we've been doing to focus exclusively on the service center relocation component. And I typically give these updates during the colloquy of regular city commission meetings. So if you're interested in kind of keeping track of this over time, in addition to reaching out to city staff or myself, maybe chatting with the commissioners, I try to give an update on this every 2 weeks. And that being said, you'll hear a little bit about the acquisition process from Kurt. There might be some things that could be considered acquisition sensitive. So if we aren't able to answer all of the questions you might have this evening, thank you. Please understand we have some constraints right now, but we will eventually be able to do that. As far as the process goes, let me give you a little bit of an overview before I introduce the team. This project really has started over the course of the last 4 months. And the way we looked at it was this is kind of a golden opportunity, if you will, for the city to take advantage of the timing of the hospital's relocation. It's serendipitous that they were looking at the service center site at exactly the point in time when the service center, by its original plan, had completed its first useful lifespan. So the existing service center is designed, and we've put these documents out on the city website. If you're interested in them, you can go take a look at the background. Was designed to last for 30 years, and we are now coming into the 30th year of that structure at exactly the point in time when we're able, instead of looking at continuing putting more capital improvements into it, to actually replace the whole building and potentially posture us to have a modern building for the next 30 years. And so in looking at that, looking at the gravity that past city commissions, past staff studied that project, their process was pretty straightforward. They reached out to all the partner jurisdictions that are tenants within the city, because there's an opportunity not just for the city to gain value out of this opportunity, but if there are other jurisdictions that have relocation or facility requirements that could be satisfied as part of this move, we wanted to make sure to extend that to all of our friends and partners. The other things that we did was we started out the process by casting the broadest possible net. And so you'll hear more about that. But what it meant was we didn't try to presuppose any filters at the beginning of the process, whether things were occupied, in use, being used for some other purpose. Those kind of things weren't part of the initial discussion. In order to try to cast the broadest possible net and encourage everybody to think as far out of the box as possible to see what kind of value we could generate for the community, we started with some pretty simple criteria. And you're going to hear more about the process of how then additional filters, additional lenses were applied to that data and where we currently stand. The important thing to keep in mind is this is an ongoing process, and what you're seeing tonight is very preliminary. So nothing here is going to be written in stone. What you're going to see is the current state of where we're at. We're actively seeking ideas from the community. We're actively seeking input from the community on the ideas that we've already had. So what you might see from your own perspective is there may or may not be sites on there that you would have thought about, that we may or may not have thought about, and vice versa. You might have other criteria that we should have contemplated that we may or may not have contemplated. Our process going forward from here is to work through with our partners, our peers, and all of the input we receive from you, the remainder of the process, leading up to a City Commission work session where we're going to be able to discuss this actively with the City Commission. That will also be a public meeting. So if we haven't resolved your questions by then, you'll have an opportunity to participate once again in the deliberation with the City Commission prior to us putting it forward for any kind of a vote. So this is the first of really 3 public meetings that we're conducting to try to get the right answer for the city and for the community. Now, as far as this meeting goes, I'd like to recognize that we have commissioners in the audience. They are here not to directly participate, but to listen. They aren't here to do anything other than to help us capture the mood of the input. There might be some of our partners here. I'm going to leave that to Kurt to maybe discuss and identify them as they believe would be appropriate. We'd encourage them to participate. And part of this I mentioned earlier was an acquisition process. Kurt's going to give you a little bit of an overview about where we stand with that as well. I've previously described that for the City Commission for updates during City Commission meetings as really taking the basic analysis that we started with, looking at the criteria necessary to start capturing what kind of firms and what kind of vendors might be interested and available to do this kind of work. And he's going to give an update on where we stand with that process and what to expect moving forward. Our hope would be that at the end of tonight, we'll have been able to capture all of your input specifically about the service center. We'll capture all the input, but specifically about the service center so that we can use that to inform the next steps of our acquisition processes and our commission decision processes. So on that note, let me take no further role other than to introduce Kurt Goodman, our superintendent and DPW director, who's been leading the team. His staff, Scott Cambenzi, who's our superintendent, Eric Stamen, who's our superintendent, both working for Kurt, and Jen LePage, who's our management analyst in the CMO, who's been throwing in because this is a pretty big project, and I think you'll agree once you hear all the things that have been going on. With no further ado, let me turn it over to Kurt Goodman.
Little story. I went to college back '78, and there's one class I took, and at this time I wish I paid closer attention to public speaking. So be patient with me. I don't do a lot of public speaking, but I'll do my best. Like Bill said, he gave a pretty good introduction, sort of a broad picture. Back when the announcement was made, when Duke LifePoint chose the city of Marquette for its new location, the process of the subject of the municipal service center possibly being having to be relocated started. There's a lot of brainstorming, a lot of rumors, a lot of input. We listened, all the public works employees, staff here, and we took notice of that. And immediately we really started throwing out ideas, conceptual possibilities, thinking outside the box, and also just doing a lot of brainstorming. That information it wasn't really put out to the public, because every time before we did that, we really got to do our homework before we share information. Make sure we have some of the facts straight before it goes out publicly. This will be the first time some of this information has been publicly announced. So that's something we wanted to make sure that we are in a position, and the timing was right, that we could bring this forward. Before I actually start the presentation, I'll give you a little update on the challenge we're against is replacing a municipal service center in a very short time period. That time period has not been established at this time. There's a lot of other moving parts within the Duke LifePoint property acquisition, and also they got to work on a design of their hospital. However, we are being pretty progressive, moving forward, because it's our goal is to not at all interrupt any services that we provide the residents of Marquette, and also do it so we don't have to move twice. So that's the sort of our approach to get this new service center built. As part of the process, we decided to go with, it's called a design build process. Basically, we would hire a engineer, architect slash general contractor to work as a team. A RFQ was sent out in December or in November with a response for December 19th. An RFQ is request for qualifications. So what we're doing, we're looking for the best engineer slash contractor that work as a team to provide a very good product to the city in a timely fashion and, of course, a cost-efficient way. That process, we had 8 responses from from design-build teams, throughout the Midwest, Michigan. All of them did have a local presence, so that was encouraging to see. And from there, we shortlisted those 8 down to 4. And the next step in this process is to request for proposal. That is a full proposal. And a proposal is about 20 pages, and that gives these design-build teams information to provide a very good conceptual idea of moving forward. There's going to be a lot of other, we will bring a lot of this information to future commission meetings. So nothing's been, set in stone. Those proposals are due January 27th. And then once we we'll make a recommendation to the City Commission on February 9th of a selected engineer, architect, design build team. So that's sort of a key step in moving forward. So there's a lot of that's a big decision that will start to get us on the ground running, and then there'll be additional meetings as we go through the design of the facility. So just let everyone know that there's no decisions on the size of the facility. We got conceptual ideas right now. Those will all be worked on through the whole process. So let's say we got a 94,000 square foot building right now. It doesn't have to be a 94,000. So there's a lot of, we're asking our engineer architects to give us some proposals. And we do not have we'll have a budgetary cost as part of that proposal, and then we'll have that information. So again, that's we had an excellent turnout today for a pre-proposal meeting. Over 28 individuals from these firms attended that. So they ask good questions, so we'll be working through that in the next couple weeks. I'm going to go through the presentation and then after I give the presentation, we're going to encourage participants to come up and make some comments, opinions, and speak on behalf of their, whatever they wish to. And then after those comments are done, we're going to then answer questions. So we're trying to, keep it in a format that everyone has a chance to speak, and then we'll open it up for questions. And once again, this is being recorded, and also Jen has taken notes, and the questions will be answered, accordingly. Okay, the current municipal service center consists of a public works building, equipment laydown area, material storage, cold storage, salt storage, and snow storage. And those are the acres appropriated to each of those functions. There's a total 16.5 acres. Okay, as I mentioned before, we've been brainstorming ever since September, actually August, September, and what we decided to do before we go out and start looking for a possible new location, we wanted to set a site evaluation criteria. And those categories included the size, location, site conditions, accessibility, surrounding property use, traffic flow, land use, zoning, utilities, and current ownership and logistics. So that was the criteria we used as we went through potential sites. Okay. Right here are sites that met the criteria. We were looking for 12 acres. That was the minimum amount of acres we need to build we believe, a service center that would meet the residents' needs. Some of these are pretty crazy. We thought outside the box. So just keep an open mind. As we have Marquette Board Light and 550, Econo Foods. It's one of those things that, hey, there's an area up there. Again, it's just one that was considered. Lakeview Arena, Marquette Mall, Medical Center, McCoggin Avenue, Ridge Street, Marquette Senior High School, Norlight Nursing Home, southeast portion of existing hospital, Tourist Park. There's an area there, a lot of trees, that might be, a possibility. West Barriga Avenue site, BLP Wright Street property, Cliff Stow site. That one's there, but that one's really not considered at all. That's sort of designated for potential other use down the road. Bothwell Middle School. Oh. So those were the sites that we considered. These were eliminated, or we answered all the questions for the criteria, wrote down why not, and we really felt that to go further on with these really wasn't in the best interest of the city and the residents. So what we did, then we came up with a site short list. These are ones that really said, you know what, these make some sense. They still need to be looked at closer, but these ones we felt a little bit confident and comfortable bringing forward to the community. Again, a lot of the criteria that was used was looked at for these met the criteria that we could use moving forward. They include a McCoggin Avenue Division, Armory National Guard Building. That's one that the Armory is looking to possibly consolidate all the armories around the UP into one central location. So that one will be, that site will be, you'll see later on, will be available, possible. North Ball Fields, and then a Wright Street property adjacent to NMU Service Center, or the heating plant. So these are the ones I'm going to sort of go in a little bit more detail about. And once again, we call this the site short list. Okay, the first one, McClellan Avenue. That's a Division Street. The city owns it. It's approximately 29 acres. Conditions: completely wooded, fairly hilly, far south portion of the city, accessed by Minor Road and Collector Road, residential, recreation, surrounding, utilities available. Another one too, the city and a lot of businesses, they rely on technology. The city of Marquette has a fiber optic loop that goes through around the city, and everything, all the buildings are connected through this fiber. It is not on the fiber loop, so that would require additional cost if we chose this site. This is the area here. It's the division of McClellan. I call it the triangle. This one, it's a possibility. You can see what we said that was a little bit hilly. Those are contour lines that, so it'd be, you need to, whatever design, incorporate within that the contours and the land characteristics. Second one, Armory Building. Again, this one, potentially this facility will become available. It's 6.1 acres. It's off Lincoln Street. But it's one that we might be able to work. You'll see a couple other sites coming up that involve a little bit of Northern's property. So if we can work together with Northern, that some way acquire this facility, Northern might be able to take, use some of this property, and then maybe do a land swap for some of their property that you'll see on a couple other sites. But it is, those are some of the conditions there. It's surprising when we were looking at the acres that it was 6 acres, and if you drive out there, it's a pretty good piece of property. Okay, Armory Field. Something I learned during this process. I forget who it was, but they said this used to be the old. This is across from the Armory, where the Northern intramural fields are, soccer fields are. This used to be the state fairground. And I don't know if anyone remembers that, but that's something I learned. Conditions: entirely flat, open area, north center of the city. There's a good road access. The area surrounding his campus, housing, armory, and also there is a residential, there's a bike path behind there too, so, and then utilities are available, and it's right on the fiber loop. How many acres is that again? Yeah, that's approximately 12 acres.
I think you're going backwards.
The right arrow.
Yeah, just see it if you're listening. There you go. So once again, it's got a flat area. It's on a couple main roads, and and this one here, of course, we're looking for that. That perfect. If anyone has 12 acres, it's all flat. Let me know. But this one's 14.3 North Marquette Ball Fields. For all these sites, there is some challenges moving forward. If this one's, you got to replace the ball field, so those are some things that we need to consider. It's got some positives. Utilities are available. It's on the fiber loop. Of course, that's on Presque Isle and on Wright Street. Okay, the last site here is sort of a unique. When we were going through all the maps and everything, we started looking at the area where this is where the old the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is. It's adjacent to Northern's heating plant. It's also, you had to really look hard to really see what is in that area. And when someone mentioned to me that, oh yeah, we got 12.6 acres, that possibility that we could utilize in that area, I said, no way. But sure enough, the GIS system really verified that. And again, there is a private landowner adjacent to this where the 18.7 would be possible. Conditions entirely flat, it's open area. There is access to the roads. It is surrounded by industrial use currently right now. Again, Northern's got their service center there too. That's behind the location. Utilities are available, and then it is on the fiber loop.
Or would you kind of run your finger around?
Yeah. Okay, right here is Wright Street here. This is 550. So we're looking at this here, down here, and of course we'd have to work with Northern on. Oh, sorry about that. Right here. Again, this is Wright Street there, and then we have County Road 550. So there is, in that cluster there is 12.6 acres. Here's a little bit better one. Another thing too is, you know, when we, I think Bill mentioned before we even started this exercise, we reached out to potential partners. Those included Marquette Public Schools, Marquette County, Board Light and Power, Northern Michigan. And we were really looking at, as we move forward, is there any possible partnerships that we can do for facilities, you know, that we could partner with. So a lot of that was you know, considered. A lot of things came out of that. So as we continue to move through the process, we will continue the dialogue with those potential partners. So there's a lot of moving parts that just because we don't have anything, you know, definite, we're going to continue working with those partnerships. So that's just a short presentation in a nutshell. Once again, I want to thank the city staff and for a lot of the work that they have done, that we have done. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this. Once again, we are always open for input, and I think this is the opportunity to solicit any input, and again, comments are definitely encouraged. So that concludes this portion of the presentation. So what I thought we would do is, if anyone wishes to speak, if you could just come up and state your name and address, and then just make any comments. And then after all the comments, we'll then open it up for questions. Anyone wishing to make any comments? Staff? Okay, I guess we'll open it up for questions. No questions.
Your job is.
I did, what?
I have a question. When you were some of the factors that were going to go into the this new municipal center, did you factor in how far the trucks would have to from back and forth depending upon which area you choose?
Question is did we factor in where is it? That would go under logistics.
Okay.
You know, basically that was definitely consideration. I just want to acknowledge the former Public Works directors here, Steve, shaking his head, Steve Laurie. I talked to Steve, you know, and he educated me the process that they went through in selecting the current facility. And Steve's a numbers guy, and I think he had mileage for every truck, every route, a very thorough evaluation. Scott and Eric, you know, we did look at that. That was part of our criteria, you know, to have it, you know, way, you know, south, where all the parks are this way, the central area, a lot of the residential streets that need plowing, you know, are, you know, in a certain area. So that was used in making the short list.
Kurt, questions.
One.
Location 550, is that north of the White Bridge? Between the White Bridge and the railroad track?
Correct.
550?
Correct.
So that would be where the old tar pit used to be?
Correct.
That is a good area. And also McClellan, because you don't want to be putting all that equipment in a residential area, because even where our snow dump is on Wright Street and Lakeshore Boulevard, the old Cliff Doll site, one of the things that people had always called me about was the backup alarms at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And Public Works is pretty much 24/7. So when people are getting off midnight shift even and try to sleep at 8 in the morning, they couldn't. And the ones that got off the day shift couldn't sleep at night because those alarms are very loud, which is, required by OSHA. So
Yeah, and again, that falls like under logistics too. The one thing, again, as we move forward towards design facility, there's a lot of site plan, a lot of engineering, the way to design the traffic flow. You can design a facility that there's very limited backing up. One thing, any of these sites, we are not anticipating a snow dump. Right now we use 4 acres of the current site for a snow dump, but any of these new sites, we don't anticipate a snow dump per se at that facility.
Look at the slide that had the sizes of the various uses occupied on the site. One of the things that we removed and can relocate elsewhere is the snow dump portion of that. Just to take that into consideration, we knew this site would probably have to make some different accommodations just because of the land that is left in Marquette to be used or reused. That that's something that can be relocated to more of an outlying area.
because what I was looking at, Kurt, was back in the 50s and the 60s, people didn't want it way out South Marquette because it was too much of a long run, or from way out north. But now with the new major arteries with McClellan Street and all that, it's no longer a far distance away like it used to be.
Correct.
So
You're also likely to have multiple smaller dumps that are closer to where we're hauling from, as opposed to one large centrally located dump like this. So you'll be able to, maybe use some of those sites that were further away from residential areas, but weren't used before because you had the larger, more centrally located ones. So, for example, the tar pit will be an area that will likely be used for hauling snow north of the town.
then you still use that snow dump off of Division Street just past the detention home?
No.
You don't use that no more?
Kurt, two things if I can. I really think this is a terrific opportunity to build a building that can fully utilize all of the energy efficiencies that we have today, and to build one that would be far more sustainable over time than what we currently have. So this is really a unique opportunity. Second point, though, as you went through the drill here of considering sites and options, did you consider the one of separating out non-essential components from DPW? For example, the engineers don't need to be out there, they can be somewhere else. Perhaps there's other ancillary groups that don't really need to be with the equipment.
Yeah, excellent question. That will be part of our, as we get that engineer, architect, the design team, under contract. That's, I call it sort of our operational needs. That's when, we're not going to come to the public and say we're building that. All those suggestions, will be looked at. We've looked at them preliminary right now, but those need to be, again, looked at very hard. So we may find out that we only need a 60,000 square foot building. So those options are still will be discussed as we go into more detailed design. Definitely, I understand what you're saying. We may have we could have a different location for for the Parks and Rec, but those will be definitely considered.
Great, thank you.
Again, that's going to be a process. But again, when we have let's say another public meeting like this, we want to make sure when we have these meetings, we've got stuff to show you. I like pictures. I think a lot of people like pictures. I think it's important that you can actually see something, and then just like we're doing here, is look at things. And again, all ideas are welcome. So.
I'm sure this is going to come up from some other community members. Well, you looked at the what I call the landfill property. I mean, doesn't the city still own that? And
Yeah, that site was not considered.
and that was not 12 acres.
I'm not sure exactly. The old landfill, the recycling center, or
The landfill itself, or the old dump, would not be appropriate. You're not going to be able to build or reuse that land for this type of operation. There is other property surrounding it that could be looked at, I guess.
Okay, I just was curious what the thoughts were on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know there's environmental control, or you can't build on top of an old dump, So there's definitely some challenge that you would have to, so that site has not been considered at this time.
Let me offer, it looks like we've got a pretty quiet group. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've scratched all your itches, I know. But why don't we take one more question or provide an opportunity before we close. We have the room till 8 o'clock. So it can either be a really great question, or what we might do is encourage you, since we've got a group of like-minded people here, to maybe spend some time reaching out to each other.
Oh, that's good.
And maybe getting an opportunity to have chats you might not want to have through this forum. But one more question if we have one. It doesn't look like we have one more question. Oh, there we are, Mike.
Bill, I have one comment. I know where all these sites are because I've lived here for 40 years. But I've lived through by the Marquette Medical Dental Center, Peninsula Medical Center, for 40 years. And one of the things that always has impacted that neighborhood is the plowing of that facility at night. And you hear those back up
Good point.
all the time. I mean, it's always continually noisy. Now, knowing where each one of these sites are, I can tell you the Elder Drive and all those things that we dealt with when the Peninsula Medical Center, because that's gone through several phases since I've lived here. I mean, that was always, the noise problem was always a concern. So I don't know how you incorporate those kind of barriers, but I know that's going to be an issue as you move forward with those sites.
Yeah.
You want to say something?
No, that's well taken. Once again, that's why we're here. Those are the things that we want to hear. I know a few of you are engineers out there. I know there's some engineer techniques that you could use to have a hill or something like that to try and avoid some of those sounds. One thing I think what's going to be fun, or for not only for the city but for the community, is be involved in the design of this. I think we can, whatever location is picked. I forget who it was, that we are going to incorporate some pretty good technology for energy efficiency. I think that's where we can really step up to the plate and really look at the operation we have now. Not that Steve did an excellent job on our current facility, but let's tweak it and make it better and make it more efficient.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. We really appreciate you taking the time to help us get our arms around this a little bit better. As I shared, there's going to be at least 2 other public meetings where you're going to have an opportunity to share your views directly with the commission and help them deliberate. And we'll look forward in the meantime to any thoughtful comments you might care to offer. Please feel free to send them to Kurt or myself, and we'll make sure that we log them and keep them actionable. And in the meantime, please have a safe drive home and a happy New Year. Thank you.